Takes a lot to unite our political parties, but once again the UK government has managed it, and all over a digital ID card no one asked for and no one wants. Welcome to The View. Tonight, Sir Keir Starmer's big plan to combat illegal work in the UK has been met with a resounding no from our political parties. We'll ask why these politicians and their colleagues are so opposed to carrying a digital Brit card. And just days after the Prime Minister is criticised for failing to mention Northern Ireland in his party's conference address, his Conservative opposite number appears to struggle with some of the basic facts.
Last time I checked, Northern Ireland did vote to leave.
Northern Ireland didn't vote to leave. Northern Ireland voted to remain in the
Scotland voted to remain. A lot of
so did Northern Ireland.
Yes, Scotland voted to remain. A lot of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain. You're right, but Wales and England voted to leave. Overall, we had 52% of people voting to leave. The United Kingdom voted to leave.
And I'm also joined by the political editor of the Belfast Telegraph, Suzanne Breen, and the editor of the newsletter, Ben Lowry, for their thoughts on those stories and more. Hello. The government has managed to unite all the main local parties with its plans to launch a mandatory digital ID card. Of course, they're divided over why they're opposed to it, which we'll see when we debate the parties' positions in just a moment. But first, here's the Secretary of State, Hilary Benn, outlining the rationale behind the plan to our political editor, Enda McLafferty.
Documentation sounds as if you haven't thought this process through and you're simply making this up as you go along. It's half-baked, as some of your MPs have already told us.
We will find a way of making this work, but it is the future, and it will also help to combat illegal migration.
So might we well see a special case for Northern Ireland in terms of how the system works over there, or will it have to fall into line with the rest of the UK?
We will ensure that the Good Friday Agreement provisions, which say that people can identify as British or Irish or both, are fully respected. I can assure you of that.
In a Northern Ireland
and we will
bespoke system?
We will find a way forward through the consultation, and I would invite people to come and contribute to that.
So you're not ruling out the prospect then of a Northern Ireland only system when it comes to these ID cards?
We'll come to a solution which fully respects the Good Friday Agreement. Of that, I'm absolutely certain.
Well, let's debate the proposals now with my panel, the Ulster Unionist peer Lord MP, the Alliance Party's Deputy Leader Owen Tennyson, the DUP's Trevor Clark, and Sinn Féin's Colm Gildernew. We did ask the SDLP, which is opposed to the government plan, to take part in the programme, but the party declined. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being with us on the programme tonight. Colm Gildernew, first of all, the Secretary of State says, this is the future and it's happening whether people like it or not.
Well, I think it's far from the future, I have to say. It's totally ill-conceived, totally betrays a lack of understanding of any of the dynamics or history or legacy of the situation that we have here on the island of Ireland. Seems to absolutely ignore the realities of the Good Friday Agreement, within which people are fully entitled to identify as Irish, British, or indeed both.
Nobody's saying you can't identify as Irish. You'll still have your Irish passport. You're as Irish when this is introduced as you are today.
Yeah, and I'll not be carrying any Brit card. I am quite happily Irish, and I will not be carrying, nor will a huge section of people here, and that's been very clear from the reaction. And this seems to be more conceived as an idea to kind of deal with the threat that's coming from reform in advance of a Labour Party conference. It shows actually a lack of understanding of what the situation is here. And that's not surprising. We also see from Kemi Badenoch there in your package that a total lack of knowledge about the situation here on the ground.
I assume you've got a UK driving licence and a UK national insurance number, and I assume you don't feel they compromise your Irish identity in any way. What would be different about this identity card?
I have an Irish passport, and that is my identity.
But you would still have an Irish passport. Do you have a UK driving licence? Do you have a UK driving licence?
I do, yes, by necessity. By necessity.
And have you got a national insurance number?
Well, since I got my driving licence, we've had the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, but do you have a national insurance number?
Back to the days. I have all of that, as you well know. I have all of that, as you well know. However, the future is a future here on this island, and people of an Irish identity will not be accepting now at this stage that they're going to be carrying Brit cards around in their pocket.
OK, well, except the reality is that the Secretary of State and certainly the Prime Minister said you need one of these to work in the United Kingdom. If you want to work in the UK, you have to have this whether you like it or not.
Well, I think that's a fallacy as well, to be quite honest. The idea that because somebody doesn't have this so-called Brit card to get work, that will deal with immigration.
Well, you're calling it a Brit card. The government's, of course, not calling it a Brit card.
Well, many people are calling it a Brit card.
Well, OK, let's bring in Trevor Clark. You don't fancy the idea of a mandatory ID card, but you're OK with a British passport, a UK driving licence and a national insurance number, presumably. What is the problem with an ID card like this?
Well, I mean, there's absolutely no requirement for this ID card. I think for some, it's the title of the Brit card annoys most of them.
Well, the government's not calling it a Brit card.
Colin to my left is calling it a Brit card.
Would you take your lead from Sinn Féin?
No, I wouldn't take my lead from Sinn Féin.
Well, then, so what are you worried about?
So I'm not worried about that aspect of it. What I do worry is that if the UK government implement this, and I actually think it's a waste of their time, that they can't leave us separated here in Northern Ireland. Because what Colin has got, which you didn't ask him, he's actually got a unique tax reference number as well. He's a UK taxpayer. So there's nothing to prevent him continuing to work currently as an Irish citizen, as a UK...
Well, sure, the same logic applies to you.
And it does, and there's no requirement because it's not actually going to help immigration problem here in Northern Ireland.
But that's what this is about. Look, the government has said...
It may be what this is about, but there's people coming here working illegally at the moment, and all of those systems are in place. You need a unique tax reference if you're self-employed, you need a national insurance number, and they have got round that system without any of those. So whenever they get an ID card, if they get an ID card, it will make no difference.
Okay.
If they come here illegally, they will continue to work in the black market the way they have.
OK, your colleague Jonathan Buckley sat in that very seat 3 weeks ago in this studio making the case against what he described as uncontrolled illegal immigration. The Prime Minister says he's trying to do something to prevent that, and you're refusing to support him. Why?
Because it won't work. We already you need a right to work.
So you know better than the Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, you need a right to work in this country. So if you're an illegal immigrant in this country, you have no right to work. And they've found ways round that. So if they've found ways round it now, equally they're not paying tax. Having in Sinn Féin's terms, a Brit card or an ID card will not make any difference whatsoever.
You know full well that immigration is a reserved issue. Your party spent a long time complaining about potential Irish Sea checks. So do you think lobbying against ID cards here might in fact end up doing that very thing, putting in place extra checks for people on the Irish Sea?
No, what the government's talking about is introducing this card for all of the UK. I'm saying if they do that, then it should be for all of the UK. What some of the parties around this table tonight will be arguing that we should be different here in Northern Ireland.
Well, Hilary Benn did not rule that out in his conversation with Enda
What
McLafferty.
I'm saying is, once we all agree there's no requirement for those, if there's no requirement for those, then there's no requirement on a UK basis because we are part of the UK. OK, Owen Tennyson, your colleague Paula Bradshaw says this is a case of the government trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. How so?
Well, because they say it's intended to tackle illegal immigration. But if you are someone who is working in the black economy or you're employing people in the black economy, you're not going to care whether someone has digital ID or not. So they're trying to solve a problem which in that sense doesn't exist. A digital ID card will make absolutely no difference. But my objection to this is more fundamental. At a simple level, I don't believe it should be a criminal offence for someone simply to be reluctant to pass over their personal and private information to government for the purposes of a digital ID.
But government people have already passed over all of those facts, all of that information to the government. You think the government doesn't already have all of the information that it might require in future in its stores, wherever it keeps the information? Of course it has that digitally at the minute.
It's not a criminal offence not to hold a passport. It's not a criminal offence not to have a driving licence. And so I think it is fundamentally illiberal. But more than that, we know that older people in our society, people who are disabled, those living in poverty, are much more likely to be digitally excluded. Now, are we seriously saying that we're going to put in place a scheme that's going to potentially criminalise those people or put further barriers in the way to those people accessing employment? I don't think that's good enough. I think it's a gimmick. And I think at a time when public services are struggling and public finances are so constrained, Labour would be much better focusing their time and energy in investing that money elsewhere.
OK, but the question is this. The government has all of this information on its records anyway. Does this actually make any difference? Apart from some kind of academic opposition to it, does it make any real difference? I mean, you don't have to have a passport, correct? You don't have to have a driving licence, but you can't really function in this society without a national insurance number, for example.
Well, it's not just academic. It's a fundamental principle of civil liberties. And if government is going to tell us that this is about delivering public services more efficient and more effective, then I understand that argument. But if it is such a compelling argument, then make it optional. There's absolutely no need for digital ID to be compulsory. And it's clear, given that they haven't even consulted with the Northern Ireland Executive about their plans, that they have not considered the complex situation in Northern Ireland, where we do have people who live in Lifford and work in Strabane, or live in Dundalk and work in Newry. And those are complexities that will have to be worked through. And I think it's clear, again, that the government has given no consideration to Northern Ireland in their development of these proposals.
And whenever you heard Hilary Benn pushed on that by our political editor, Enda McLafferty, and he said, we will find a way, I assure you, we will find a way to look after the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement. We will find a way to make this work for everybody, including people in Northern Ireland. Are you reassured by that? Do you believe him?
I'm not, because they ought to have done that due diligence before they announced the proposal. And I have no confidence that they'll follow through, because it wouldn't be the first time, Mark, that this Labour government has engaged in a U-turn.
Lord MP, do you think there's anything really that the political parties in Northern Ireland can do to stop this if the government in Westminster wants to push ahead with it?
I'm far from convinced it'll get through Parliament. I can't see it getting through the House of Lords for a start.
Well, I mean, it's not going to presumably have much difficulty getting through the House of Commons with the majority of, 161 working majority at the moment.
Yes, look, first, two things. Firstly, it was sold as a way of stopping illegal immigration. Absolutely nothing to do with illegal immigration. If you're going to tackle people who are using the black labour market, the way to tackle them is to deal with the employers. It's the people who employ these people that they should be targeting, and not the individuals themselves. Secondly, it's a way of distracting attention from the fact that they have failed completely to deal with the Refugee Convention of 1951 and the way the ECHR has been interpreted by our own courts. That's the only way you can deal with illegal immigration. You can't deal with it by digital ID cards. Secondly, if we look at what's happened in the last couple of weeks, Marks and Spencer's has been hacked, the Co-op has been hacked, Jaguar Land Rover has been brought to a standstill, and even the other day, a chain of children's nurseries has been hacked. Who would have confidence that the state could bring all our digital ID into one place and retain it?
Yeah, but would it make any difference? Because all of that information is widely available anyway. Most people watching this programme will be on social media, will have Instagram accounts, TikTok accounts, Facebook accounts.
I'm sorry,
Twitter accounts.
If you bring it all into one place, you can be debanked, you can be mistaken for somebody else. There'll be one blunder after another.
Sorry, hang on. I think we need to be clear about this. The government is not going to store your banking information on a digital ID.
If you look at what happened in other countries, that has happened. And it will grow. It'll be a mission creep. And you'll not be able to do anything. And we'll get to the stage where you're walking in the streets of London and a police officer comes up to you and says, papers, please.
Yeah, well, you say that, but it's a bit of a leap. I mean, your colleague Steve Aiken says your party vehemently opposes any attempt to introduce digital ID. He says, far from being the bedrock of the modern state, it's designed to act as a control mechanism and is fundamentally un-British. What do you imagine he means by a control mechanism? I mean, we're not living in an Orwellian state.
Well, I'm sorry, but a lot of people would say that the way things have gone in the last year, 18 months, we're getting closer to that. The state is bad at keeping personal data. It has failed time and time again to secure things. Papers, important papers, have been found dumped on motorway and roundabouts.
Yeah, but look, the reality is we live in a digital world where a lot of this information is already available. And introducing an ID card is hardly likely to tip the balance, is it?
If that is the case, Mark, why are we going through all this? If you're telling me all the information is already available, then what more information do they want?
Well, the government clearly believes that this is a way of dealing with the issue of uncontrolled illegal immigration.
It won't stop the votes.
It may not.
Stop the votes.
Well, what the Prime Minister says is this is part of his efforts to do that.
But no, it's not, because, I mean, they've brought in this one out, one in. They've only returned one person. If they actually stopped the boats coming in,
but if it was that simple, do you not think that the government would have done it a long time ago?
Well, it actually is more simple than whether the government have approached this. The government have worked with France and are allowing them to land. They should be returned as soon as they land.
Okay,
they shouldn't be allowed to land.
That's a separate issue, because I do want to keep the
because
focus.
there wouldn't be a requirement for an ID card if they were never in this country.
Okay.
It may not be the case, Mark, that this will lead to state control, but look at what we've seen on the streets of Northern Ireland over the past year. We've seen people targeted simply because they're a member of our ethnic minority community, and I fear that where this will lead is we'll have vigilantes roaming the streets demanding to see people's papers, given that there's a requirement that people would have digital ID, and I don't think government has thought through those potential consequences and what they could be inviting on ethnic minority communities as a result, and I think they need to tread very lightly and think very carefully before going down that road.
Colin Gilden, Jonathan Buckley from the DUP said in the Assembly chamber during the week that nationalist parties don't like this because it's about 4 letters, B-R-I-T. Is he right?
No, well, the fact that it's a British identity card fails to recognise the complexity. I live in a border community. We have many, many members of our community who work on one side of the border and live on the other side of the border. That goes both ways.
But the point is, it's got a lot more to do with the Brit card, which you've mentioned already yourself several times, than it has to do with digital security.
Well, it's clearly completely ill thought out. I mean, we had a senior Labour member who stated it was mandatory, only having to be told that it wouldn't be mandatory, only having to be told a few hours later. To me, it looks like it was born out of a sense of panic and rushed out. And when Hilary Benn's talking about we will get this right, that to me clearly demonstrates he's acknowledging that this is not right. This is more to do with looking over their shoulder at reform, trying to hold off the surge from Farage and these people, and has no consideration for what we need here, and that is an ongoing difficulty.
Yeah, but your problem is that your colleague Sinead Ennis said this mandatory Brit card, as she termed it, is an attack on Irish citizens in the north. I mean, you may wish to interpret it that way as far as Northern Ireland's concerned. It is not an attack on citizens in the United Kingdom because they're Irish. I mean, so you are using something that is a UK-wide policy and turning it around and turning it into an anti-Irish issue, which it clearly isn't.
What we're saying is we're Irish. Large numbers of people here identify as Irish and do not wish to be identified with a British identity.
Yes, but that wouldn't change. I mean, I come back to my initial point, which is that would not change at all. Nobody's saying that you can't continue to be Irish and you can't continue to have an Irish passport, as tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in Northern Ireland clearly do.
It wasn't us who labelled it a Brit card, but that's what it's been identified as. Yeah. That's what it's been sold as, and it's totally
it was the British press. It wasn't the British government.
Totally ill-considered, totally ill thought out, and that's very clear from the reactions.
Okay, I wonder what you think, Trevor Clark, you can do about this now. You all clearly, demonstrably disagree with this as a policy that the British government wants to bring in. But you clearly also disagree for mostly very different reasons. What do you think you can actually do about it? Because I said there to Lord MP, 161 majority in the House of Commons. If Keir Starmer wants to push ahead with this, there's going to be precious little you're going to be able to do to stop it.
We may all agree in terms of we don't want it, and for different reasons. However, what I can tell you, and I can assure you, is our MPs will be in Westminster voting against it. The question is, will Sinn Féin then take up the mantle?
You know that.
So then it's a false fight on their part, because this is not really. I mean, Colin's not been serious.
Yeah, but here's the point. Whether Colin Gilden and his colleagues turn up or not, and whether your colleagues bother to turn up or not, doesn't matter who turns up. Doesn't matter if the Alliance MPs turn up. It doesn't matter who turns up. If the government, with a majority of 161, want to push it through,
you're assuming they would all vote for it.
Well, there are clearly some backbenchers who are not happy with it.
That's right.
But you'd think, with a majority of 161, they'd get it through.
You've got to understand, any legislation has got to go through both houses.
Yeah. You think and the House of Lords is going to be in the business of blocking a democratically elected government
that wants to introduce a policy, is it? Of preventing...
It might delay it.
Hold on.
And it might shape
it can delay it.
It might improve it.
It can do both of those things. But bearing in mind, it wasn't in anybody's manifesto. And if it was, we would be obliged to support it or to let it pass. But it wasn't.
Keir Starmer was elected, though, as an MP. With the greatest respect, he leads the largest party. He's the Prime Minister. You're an unelected member of the House of Lords.
Look, that's perfectly true. But we're dealing with facts.
Yeah. And the fact is he's got a majority of 161.
He may have a majority of 100, but he still has to get it through both houses. Now, look, I'm not getting involved in the local argument here because, from my point of view, it's been sold as a way of preventing illegal immigration. And that is a falsehood. It's a demonstrable falsehood. The only way, and the reason why we have this surge coming in to the country is because, and we're the only country practically left in Europe that is allowing this to happen. People are coming through 4 or 5 safe countries to get here because we are soft and they can get away with it. And that's the problem. And the trouble about that is it's bringing all legally immigration into disrepute as well.
But you know that the UK government's position is, if we can get this new card in place, it will hopefully put off would-be immigrants in future.
Mark,
I'm only articulating the government line, which is that people thinking about coming might think again and not come because they know they won't have access to this ID card.
The same thing with the one in, one out.
That's the argument.
They said the same with the one in, one out. And the other day there was 876 people arriving in the boats.
OK. Let me just ask you this, Trevor Clark. Do you think unionists really want to set themselves apart from everyone else in the rest of the United Kingdom? If this goes through in England, Scotland and Wales, and if you can persuade the government to water it down or not introduce it at all for Northern Ireland, that makes Northern Ireland different. That increases surely the sense of Northern Ireland being a place apart rather than an integral part of the UK. Is that really the road you want to go down?
So it's not the road I want to go down. First of all, there's no reason for the UK government to introduce it. Secondly, if they do introduce it, there is no reason for them not to include Northern Ireland, because there's nothing in terms of the Good Friday Agreement that would prevent them doing so. I mean, this is the fallacy that Colum's putting forward. In terms of people living in the Irish border and they're seen as Irish citizens working in the north, they're still UK taxpayers. Yeah, they're still registered with the UK HMRC. So there's no difference. So there's no difference.
I would understand you making that argument to Colm Gildernew if you were trying to persuade him of the point and the purpose behind the so-called Brit card. You're making that point against Colm Gildernew to knock him out of the argument, but you also agree with him fundamentally that this is a bad idea.
I agree.
You're trying to have your cake and eat it.
No, I'm not actually.
Well, you are.
Well, you may think that, but what Colin wants to do is, if this comes in, he wants us to be different. He wants us to in an opt-out position in Northern Ireland. What I'm saying clearly is, if the UK government introduces this, then it's all of the UK, Northern Ireland included.
Okay. Which, from your point of view, would be a bit of a disaster, would it not? Because you don't want it and you think it would be bad for people in Northern Ireland.
I don't know which part you're not hearing, Mark. I'm saying if it comes, which I'm against, it's a UK-wide policy. Yes. Because I'm a UK citizen.
No, I understand
I'm a UK taxpayer.
Well, not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody agrees with that. But yes, that's your argument.
Colum's an Irish citizen, but he's also a UK taxpayer. So there's nothing to preclude him whether it's in or out. What I'm saying is the government shouldn't introduce it in the first place. However, what Colum's arguing for is if it does come in, he thinks Northern Ireland should be different and we shouldn't.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Colm Gildernew. Do you think, given that you agree on the policy of opposing this but disagree on why, but let's set that to one side at the moment, could the First Minister, could the Deputy First Minister come together, do you think, and write a letter to the British Prime Minister explaining why this is bad news for Northern Ireland and maybe for the whole of the United Kingdom, and try to persuade him that he should think again?
Well, I think that's been made very, very clear already. The North is different. The North is different due to our complex past, and that's why we have a Good Friday Agreement, and we will defend the Good Friday Agreement and all of the rights within that agreement, and that's why we will oppose any such identification.
And Hilary Benn says he can square this with the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement. He doesn't have a difficulty doing that.
Well, you think they've squared it before they brought it
out?
Well,
you might think that, but he says it can still happen.
As I said at the start, it's an ill-thought-out, ill-considered.
Okay, do you think that, Owen Tennyson, do you think that Alliance members of the Executive would be prepared to sit down and sign such a letter?
Absolutely, we would. I think it's important that parties work together. Northern Ireland is a shared society, and we are a complex and contested space, and so it's important that we protect our interests. But I wouldn't rule out this not happening at a UK level. Thatcher tried this and failed. Blair tried this and failed. There are over 2 million signatures on a parliamentary petition opposing this, and Labour backbenchers will be feeling pressure in their constituency. So let's wait and see.
Okay, and the bottom line again, of course, is worth making the point. The Prime Minister, during his speech as Labour Party leader at the Labour Party conference, didn't mention Northern Ireland once. He said the word Belfast once in relation to investment. He never mentioned Northern Ireland. He clearly left it out when he was talking about the United Kingdom.
And most of these big announcements on legacy and on this are made during a parliamentary recess when we can't even, the government can't even be questioned. But look, Colm's talking about the Good Friday Agreement. Let's be clear. I'm the only one at this table was involved in that. And nothing that is happening is proposed as anything to it. Sinn Féin didn't even support the Good Friday Agreement when it came out. So let's not wrap themselves with that.
Well, it supported it, it didn't sign up to it, and it's very clear that it supports it now. So we're slightly splitting hairs, Reg, I think. Okay, very quickly, Colm.
The British government have much more important things to be thinking about, and that's why that tells you this is a distraction.
Okay, we'll leave it there, folks. Interesting conversation. We'll come back to it, no doubt. Thank you all very much indeed. Let's get some analysis of that now from the Belfast Telegraph's political editor, Suzanne Breen, and the newsletter's editor, Ben Lowry. Welcome to both of you. Well, it's a lively conversation just to talk through some of the issues here. Suzanne, what did you make of that? I mean, we've got four politicians who agree passionately that this is a very bad idea, but disagree passionately on why that should be the case.
We live in Northern Ireland. Politics here, especially since the return of Stormont after the summer recess, it's been very divisive, very toxic. So I think it's actually been good to see politicians from our main parties agreeing on something, singing off the same hymn sheet, even if it is for very different reasons. It's a positive, and let's take it.
Yeah, I mean, agreeing and singing off the same song sheet up to a point. Yeah. I mean, when you hear them saying, when you hear people at the table there saying this is an ill thought through strategy on the part of the government, which is looking over its shoulder at Nigel Farage, does that ring true as far as you're concerned?
Totally rings true. I mean, this is a gimmick. It has absolutely nothing to do, nothing for the benefit of people in Britain or in Northern Ireland. It is a gimmick by Keir Starmer. And I do think it's too much Big Brother. I mean, I don't want the state tracking every aspect, every part of my life. I don't think we have a benevolent state. As a journalist, you know, we journalists were arrested. The state went through journalists' phone data. So I have no confidence in the state or the limits that it will set. So I think they're all right.
But an ID card wouldn't make any difference, would it? Because if the government or whatever part of the government wants access to information about you, it doesn't need to give you an ID card to get that information. It can get it already.
Well, then it is acting unlawfully, as it has acted with 8 journalists in Northern Ireland, as the McCullough report review showed recently. And just because the government does add an act unlawfully doesn't mean that we should facilitate it lawfully. OK. Ben, I wonder what you make of it. I mean, are you concerned at unionist tactics in terms of dealing with this issue?
Yes, I think unionist tactics have been incredibly stupid, and I'll talk about that in a second. The first thing I'd say is there not a single MLA out of 90? I mean, is there not even one who's prepared to say, well, let's have a look at this? Is there not a single one of our 18 MPs? That's, what, 88 people? I think our politicians, it's not the first time that they've been completely unanimous when there were strikes in Northern Ireland, public sector strikes. I don't recall one speaking against it. So I'm not saying I'm pro it, I'm saying that we have a really serious crisis, as your recent programmes, there are politicians who agree with me on that, when it comes to immigration. Again, in the Western world, in other countries too. We've lost control of our borders. We don't know who we've let in. It's a disastrous situation. And I would say that if ID cards might do something for that, we live in a digital age, let's look at it.
But the politicians say that's not the case. This is a gimmick and it won't work.
It might or might not work, but I think we should look at it. I had to fill in a form to get clearance to go to an event recently, and I was struck by the cross-referencing that there already is. I had to give my driving licence number, I had to give my press card number, and various things. So there's a lot of information there. Anyway, and if that can be used for the benefit, I don't quite agree with Suzanne. I think the state is benevolent in Western societies. We're really lucky to live in Western societies, and we have this crisis with immigration, which is a threat to Western societies. But as to your point about unionist tactics,
yeah.
It's very hard to be polite about them. It's so foolish. It was so
across
obvious.
The board. In your view?
On this particular topic.
Yeah, but I mean unionists across the board on this issue.
Well, I haven't seen many. I mean, Jim Allister's statement did mention in his first statement, not at the top, but he did mention further down that there mustn't be an Irish sea border coming out of this. The Ulster Unionist statement, I think it was last Friday or Thursday, I can't remember which day it was. I certainly wrote about it on Friday for Saturday's paper. The Ulster Unionist statement and the DUP statement didn't say anything about that. And it was so obvious that, I mean, Enda McClafferty's interview, the BBC have said all along that there's this unanimity. You said it at the top of the show. The Good Morning Ulster interview with Lisa Nandy mentioned this unanimous opposition. But the questioning that Enda McClafferty did was, will there be opt-out, will there be a carve-out? That was the pressure of the questioning. And do unionists not see that their concerns, which are civil liberties, is not something that's being pressed in these interviews, and the unanimity will be... You could already see Hilary Benn almost backtracking.
Yeah, so Enda, it was very interesting to see Enda pushing Hilary Benn and to hear what Hilary Benn had to say. But when I was talking to Trevor Clark there tonight, he was absolutely crystal clear. He made the point that whatever the deal is as far as GB is concerned, we want Northern Ireland to be treated in precisely the same way. And if that means we end up having this card imposed upon us, we would rather have that than Northern Ireland be treated differently.
So I'm glad to hear this point being made. And I did say that Jim Allister made that in his original statement. I'm very glad.
So Trevor Clark made it clearly tonight.
What I'm saying is that this is so serious. I would have expected something like the 3 unionist leaders to come together and say, by the way, we are all agreed that number one, in this time of an Irish Sea border and very serious assaults on unionism and weak UK governments, number one, the only thing that matters in this overall is that it's UK-wide. It either happens UK-wide or isn't. Then afterwards get into the other arguments about civil liberties and stuff that are being ignored from a unionist perspective anyway. Nobody's listening to unionist concerns about that.
OK, right. We'll come on to Kemi Badenoch in just a moment. Before we do that, Suzanne, I just want to ask you about Keir Starmer's speech and what you made of what he had to say and the fact that he very consciously, it seemed to me and many commentators, avoided mentioning or discussing or referring to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, it was really, really obvious. I mean, Keir Starmer is not focused on this place at all. There isn't a single vote for him here. He doesn't care about us.
Which is bizarre because he used to work here and people said, well, it's interesting because he gets Northern Ireland.
More fool them. One part of his speech, at the opening of his speech, that I noted was when he talked about how the state had turned its back on people, and he mentioned the Hillsborough families, he mentioned the Grenfell Tower families, he mentioned the Windrush families, and he said Labour was always there, Labour was a friend for them, Labour would fight for them and get results for them. And I don't know how this sits with the way that this Labour government is treating 87-year-old Bridie Brown in Balahi, who is being denied a public inquiry for her husband. She's going to have to go to the Supreme Court in London. The woman can barely walk, and that it is this Labour government, it is this Labour Secretary of State that is denying Bridie Brown justice, and I think they really need to examine their consciences and think again. OK,
let's just pause for a moment and move on to discuss the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch's interview earlier today with our political correspondent Jane McCormack ahead of the Tory party conference in Manchester next week. Jane wanted to know, first of all, about Ms Badenoch's position on legacy.
How concerned are you about Labour repealing your party's Legacy Act? Of course, it was controversial at the time.
I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about this rollback. Any legislation of this nature is always going to be difficult, and we went through quite a lot of pain to get people in a position where we could actually deliver the Legacy Act.
But it was ruled unlawful by the courts, though, and everybody in Northern Ireland is glad to see the back of it.
Well, I disagree. When you speak to veterans, when you speak to a lot of the people who are affected by it, I think that they're worried that again and again, decisions which were made by politicians they are the ones who are being held accountable for them. We did put this act in place for a reason. I know that not everybody agreed with it, but as with anything that we do in Northern Ireland, we've got to make sure that we keep, the government there running, that we keep the two sides together, and that we don't continue going backwards and forwards without providing
They were all united
any
against
certainty.
your party's Legacy Act. Speaking of your own legacy, your MPs are jumping ship to Nigel Farage and Reform UK. You're looking over your shoulder constantly at him and political rivals in your own party. Are you not worried?
I'm not looking over my shoulder at all. What I'm looking is forward, because what we're seeing is a Labour government that cannot run this country. Unemployment has risen every single month since they came into office. The economy is in free fall. They've got no plans. They spent 14 years in opposition.
But I'm talking about Nigel Farage
leave.
as well. They're specifically taking people from your party. You're the Conservative and Unionist
but
leader.
Nigel Farage is not running the country. Nigel Farage is polling well.
The polls suggest that he could do well.
That's true.
And I want to ask you, do you think Nigel Farage would be good for the Union or bad for the Union? You're the Conservative and Unionist leader. What do you think he would be?
So that's absolutely the right question. But I have to remind people again and again, the polls are polls. We had the SDP Liberal Alliance polling at 50% and they went nowhere. We need to look at what is actually happening in our country. What is the government doing?
What about Nigel Farage? Do you think he'd be good or bad for the Union?
I'm not here to talk about Nigel Farage. People keep saying that everyone's talking about reform. It's because we keep getting
You're the Conservative and Unionist leader.
So I'm here to talk about conservatism and unionism, not Nigel Farage. I believe in the union of the United Kingdom. One of the things we want to do is make sure we keep our country together, not divided. These other parties, both Labour and Reform, very polarising. The Conservative Party brings people together. So I will talk about what we can do.
How does the Conservative Party bring people together, though? Your party delivered Brexit and the Irish Sea border.
Yes. But last time I checked, Northern Ireland did vote to leave.
Northern Ireland didn't vote to leave. Northern Ireland voted to remain in the Scotland
voted to remain. A lot of
so did Northern Ireland.
Yes, Scotland voted to remain. A lot of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain. You're right. But Wales and England voted to leave. Overall, we had 52% of people voting to leave. The United Kingdom voted to leave. The citizens of the country voted to leave. And while I recognise, Jane, if I may finish, please, I do recognise the people in Northern Ireland voted to remain. And we came up with a settlement. It wasn't perfect, but to try and make sure we had a way of Northern Ireland getting the best of both.
Still and you said you wouldn't unpick the Windsor Framework. Is that still your position, given how unionists feel?
But Jane, I am the new Conservative Party leader. The party is under new leadership. I'm not here to talk about what the Conservative government did. We are out of office. We have Labour in power. What is Labour doing? If we keep talking about what we're going to do over the last 14 years, we will never move forward.
Kemi Badenoch speaking there to Jane McCormack. Ben, the Conservative leader didn't know some of the basic facts there, and the Labour leader didn't mention Northern Ireland in his conference speech, not even in relation to jokes about football. What does that mean for unionism?
I think it's always a problem for unionism, the fact that we make up 3 or 4% of the population of the UK, and people often forget about us, and Boris Johnson often didn't mention us much, and Rishi Sunak. I was at a number of Conservative conferences where the Northern Ireland was barely mentioned, if at all, and I think it was a lamentable error of Kemi Badenoch not to know that Northern Ireland voted to stay. I was actually surprised that the pro-Brexit vote was approaching 45%. I think it was 44%, but clearly we did vote to remain, so she should have known that. I think it was very interesting to hear her talking about legacy. I think it's my hope would be that there will be pushback against the really scandalous situation that an Irish government that is suing the UK for the last government's proposed conditional amnesty, when the Irish government's, according to its former Justice Minister, operated what we all know, a de facto amnesty for IRA terrorists after 1994, and it's suing the UK.
That situation between the two governments seems to have changed now, doesn't it?
Then this weak government has let a government that's suing it jointly decide legacy, and I'm glad to see her pushing back against that.
OK. Suzanne, what do you make of that basic error of fact by Kemi Badenoch? And do you think Keir Starmer and to some extent Kemi Badenoch, as Jane made the charge there, are both looking over their shoulders at Nigel Farage?
They are totally. I mean, that was calamity Kemi. I think you could put her knowledge of Northern Ireland on the back of a postage stamp. She joins Karen Bradley and a long list of other Tories who have neither information or feel for this place. And this is a woman who has prided herself on making no gaffes, and yet this was a whopper here. And she made a similar mistake when she was at a Conservative conference in Wales, and she got Welsh parliamentarians mixed up with Scottish ones. So look, I think these people are focused mainly on England, not on the devolved regions.
OK, we're out of time, folks. Really good to have you both on the programme. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. That is it for tonight. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics at the usual time of 10 o'clock on BBC One, when I'll be talking to the SDLP leader Claire Hanna, fresh from her party's annual conference on Saturday. Do join me for that. But in the meantime, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.